Judges today on the subject of Gideon. We want to read about some of the things that Gideon did. And so we're reading from chapter 6 and verse, we can read quite a bit actually. He had a calling, Gideon had a calling, and actually when you read the story, you see he was intimidated, but then he was encouraged. So he was shy or intimidated and afraid because he's a minority. He's a minority in the nation, and they are oppressed by Midianites, and Gideon has this tendency not to think so well about himself, also to be a bit afraid of the adversary, and also the idolatry of the day. The idolatry was Baal, the god of fertility, and you think of the natural man is drawn to idols, and that's just the main theme in our Bible, that the heart of man is tending to his own appetites, his own cravings, and the idols accommodate that. Like you can do what you want. That's what I want to. I want to follow that kind of a philosophy, or that kind of a God who would allow me to do what I want to do, what I feel like doing, but I don't like to be told, I can't do this and I can't do that. So it's interesting how in the book of Judges they turned to God in the time of the judge, and the judge leads a revival, and the way of worship, and the leader who is a hero. I read that the book of Judges, another title for it would be the book of heroes. Yeah, they're like heroes. They're like against the opposition. They can fight a good fight. They can take a stand. So Gideon wasn't by nature inclined to be that way, but God had called him, and it shows how God calling somebody can equip them to be leading even against strong opposition. So we'll just read part of one story and notice something here. So Gideon is in verse 26, verse 28, when the men of the town rose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah beside it was cut down. That was like a pole. The Asherah was like a pole that they worshipped. It was cut down. The second bull was offered on the altar that had been built. They said to one another, "Who has done this thing?" And after they had searched and inquired, they said, "Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this thing." And because he did it at night. I think we better go back to verse 25. Verse 25. That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull and the second bull, 7 years old, pull down the altar of Baal that your father has." Whose father had an idol, had an altar? Gideon's father. Was Gideon's father like an idolater? Apparently. Okay, but now he is told to tear it down. And so, and he cut down the Asherah, that's the pole that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull, offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah that you shall cut down. So the pole was wooden, cut down, burned, and the bull that pulled it down the altar to Baal. It looks like there were two different. One was the altar to Baal, and the other one was the pole. And he just destroyed it with his father's two bulls. Okay, right? and one of the bulls is offered up as a sacrifice. Then take the second bull, offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah that you shall cut down. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. Okay? All right, so maybe it looks like it's a big deal what he's doing. But he's taking a stand in the village with his father's idolatry, with his father's bulls, and he does it at night. Now, what do you think he expects to happen in the morning? That somebody's going to be in trouble. And the people in the village know it's Gideon, because that's the next part, verse 28. When the men of the town rose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah beside it was cut down. The second bull was offered on the altar that had been built. And they said one to another, "Who has done this thing?" And after they had searched and inquired, they said, "Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this thing." Then the men of the town said to Joash, "Bring out your son that he may die, for he has broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it." But now his father, like, what does a father say? He said, "Will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down." What is another way of saying that? What did the father say? He said what? Yeah, let the God defend himself. No, your son did this. He tore it down, and we won him. And the father said, what? He's basically saying, I'm sure he had sympathy for his son. He didn't want to lose his son. So he said, let the God defend himself. If he is God, then let him defend himself, right? So, well, then why, as the father, why did you worship him? Like, if he isn't God, but you've been worshiping him. But that's the way idolatry is. It's kind of like you have respect for it when it's doing what you want it to do, but you don't have respect for it if you're really serious about it. You know, if it's my son, if my son's life is in jeopardy, I'm going to say, well, it's not about my son, it's about this God. And let this God defend himself, if he is God. Which is, you know, actually where we are at in our world, that there are people that want to protect their God, but when it comes down to it, reality has a way of saying, if it's God, it can defend itself. All right, so go ahead, defend yourself. We'll tear down all the altars, cut down all the poles, and if you are God, then you can defend yourself. So where do you see that with Yahweh? Where do you see God defending himself? What? Yeah, that's a good one. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Fire came down from heaven. There's another one that I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, like Moses' rod becomes a serpent, and before Pharaoh's magicians, who also had their rods become serpents, but Moses' rod ate up all the other ones. But there's another one. It was when the Philistines took the ark And they took the ark into the house of Dagon, and the god of Dagon was fallen over, right? And they set it back up on its, and then the next day it was fallen over without arms and without the head, I think. And it was a fish god. It was mermaid. It was half fish and half man, the god of Dagon. They were by the sea, the Philistines, and they had that kind of a god. So it fell over because God defends himself. God is the living God, that God can take care of himself and actually doesn't need us to defend him. He can defend himself, of course. And then he can't really be hurt by anybody because God changes not, in Malachi 3:6. So the attributes of God are our constant meditation. Yeah, Ula. Gamaliel, you mean? Yeah, Gamaliel. Yeah, like leave these men alone. If this is of God, you can't overcome it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay, so we can't hurt God, we can't cut him down, we can't destroy God. Also, you can't do anything against the truth. Is 2 Corinthians 13, like verse 10. That's amazing. You can't do anything against the truth. The truth is the truth. And God is God. He changes not. And before the earth was, and this is who he is, and we are worshipers of him. So this is interesting because the father, Joash, said he gave Gideon a new name, and that name was Jerubbaal. Let's read it. Chapter 6, verse 32. Therefore, in that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. That is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he broke down his altar. So, if I broke down his altar, then he should attack me or come against me or defend himself, contend with me. So Gideon's father gave him that name, Jerubbaal, which means, doesn't it mean let Baal contend for himself, right? Let him contend for himself. Like, in other words, Gideon will have a name, and it will be that Gideon challenged Baal. He challenged him, and now Baal has to contend for himself. Like, go ahead, do your fighting. We face off with you. We face off with you. I don't know how many of you have had experience with third world people or know about some of these ideas, but there was a guy that I had met from a third world country. He said that there was a god on the island where he lived, and I said, well, what was a god? What is it? He said he was a headless horseman, and everybody on the full moon, they wouldn't go out at night because he would ride through like villages and he would destroy. He was a headless horseman. And I said, well, like, you're an educated person. I mean, did you believe that? And like, what was that all about? He said it was when the full moon was out, it would hit this tree, and it looked like a rider that was headless, And everybody was believing in it, talking about it, and how dangerous it was, and he could kill children and the whole thing. And then he said, then one day I decided to investigate it, and I realized that it's all just a lie, based on something, an impression. And that's what the blessing is of our life, our new life, is that we're able to face the lies and reveal them to be, they are revealed to be what they are. And if it's true, you can't do anything against it. It's the Almighty God who is behind this great, and this has been to the promotion of our civilized world, that we have reason, we have faith, we have the revelation of the nature of God, and this is how we live, so we can face every lie. Now, in our politics here in the States, it's incredible when people are saturated with lies and they can't be corrected. Well, if you are living in lies and you can't be corrected, then the reality has the nature of correcting you. If you want to believe in the headless horseman, you can, but your island may not be doing so well when there's a full moon out, if people live in fear and believe a lie and keep them in that, state of mind. Or that men can play in women's sports. Like, reality has a way of checking you if you believe that. Like, if you believe that there shouldn't be any difference between a man and a woman, then it's like, you can, but the nature of things, because the world doesn't, it doesn't like lies. It doesn't like lies. It exposes them. And this is why I just think about it. I'll just leave you with a thought. Gideon's father, nicknamed Gideon Jerubbaal, which means Baal, my son. This is my take on it. My son took you out. Now you defend yourself. Go ahead. You defend yourself. If you are a God that can be taken out by a man, then you're not much of a God. But but the man taking out Christ comes back 3 days later and says, "Hello, I'm here. Hello." That's the kind of God we have, and we can be strong in Him, and follow Him. So here's the interesting thing about this. Gideon had 70 sons. That was like, he had many wives, he had many children, and you can read it there in the story. But he's forgotten about. His children are killed, executed. He's forgotten about, and they go back to Baal. They just go back to worship of Baal. Where is it? It's the end of chapter 8, verse 33. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal Berith their god. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies. And they did not show love to the family of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in return for all the good that he'd done for Israel. You will be forgotten. Amazing. There'll be a contest for truth. You will win. It'll have a big impact, but don't hold your breath. The people are fickle, with deceitful hearts, and we're idolaters in our nature. And so they will turn away from the Apostle Paul. They will turn away from Jesus Christ. They'll turn away from the church. They'll turn away from the faith of their fathers. They'll turn away. And that's what, right now we're celebrating some victories in our country in the culture contest. And we are really thankful that we're going in a good direction. But don't hold your breath. It changes. The pendulum swings, and it can change. But let us win souls, preach the gospel, and share our faith. Amen? Okay, you're dismissed.